40 years, no one knew what had happened to baby Holly. Then this month, investigators were able to track her down. City leaders here in Miami Beach had those similar concerns over spring break, which is why they had the curfew this past weekend. The crash in Miami Beach happened here in the waters behind me. You just saw this is a very popular area. Police were there escorting them when all of a sudden some protesters started throwing rocks and bottles at officers. Tuition is either too high or they have to work full-time to pay for their bills. West Point Academy officials tell News Nation that they are aware of the incident, but that's exactly what investigators are still trying to figure out. Allegedly, during their stay, there were several hotel guests complaining of a strong odor coming from their rooms, coming from what appeared to be either an AC unit or a water heater. Imagine pulling up to that crime scene, and the victims there are your two parents and your teenage son. Police say this is an unusually personal story. The biggest challenge this year has been the rising cost of diesel gas because everything on the farm is affected by it. Pope Francis hasn't mentioned anything about retiring, at least not just yet.
They're actually taking me to Formula One, which probably isn't the most relaxing Mother's Day, but it's going to be very fun, and I'm very excited.
This entire area was covered with protesters, and that's really been the case all over the country. Take a look at this video. This is from last night in Los Angeles. Protesters were there marching in Pershing Square, that's downtown Los Angeles. Police were there escorting them when all of a sudden some protesters started throwing rocks and bottles at officers. One officer was injured, but Adrian, for the most part, protests across the country have been safe, they've been calm, and people have been focused on the issue. From coast to coast, thousands of people are taking to the streets holding signs with clear messages. Many are demanding abortion rights be protected after the leak of a draft Supreme Court opinion that would overturn the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade decision to legalize abortion. This pro-choice rally in New York City had more than 2,000 demonstrators who blocked traffic, then huddled around to listen to speakers. New York Attorney General Letitia James was one of them, and she shared her own story.
And I chose to have an abortion. I walked proudly into Planned Parenthood.
Organizers from the Women's March urged people from Florida to California to protest at their local federal buildings. They did. From both sides, people loudly and peacefully speaking out. Pro-life supporters lined up outside the Supreme Court in D.C. They say this is the moment they've been fighting for.
It's an exhilarating moment because we've got them on the run. There is no right to kill a baby.
We're happy to stand for the unborn today. We're happy to show the Supreme Court that there are people out there supporting this decision.
The most extreme demonstration was across the country in San Francisco. This man calls himself the pro-life Spider-Man. He free climbed 60 floors of the Salesforce Tower to protest abortion. And Adrian, for the most part, things have been pretty calm, pretty quiet, and people pretty respectful across the country. There are more protests later on today and throughout the week. In this particular case, attorneys say Walgreens didn't do enough to protect patients, and they're blaming Walgreens for the addiction and the death of thousands of people. In Florida, nearly 40,000 people have died of opioid overdoses over the last 20 years, and thousands more have become addicted. The legal team from the Florida's Attorney General's office is suing Walgreens for improperly supplying billions of painkillers and putting profits over life.
They were high school athletes who had injury. They were truck drivers who had lower back pain. They were new mothers who had post-birth pain.
Attorneys representing Florida argue Walgreens was negligent in its duty to fill legitimate prescriptions. They dispensed more than 4.3 billion opioid pills in the last 15 years. Attorneys claim half of them should have been flagged for abuse, addiction, or fraud, but claim Walgreens failed to investigate prescriptions that were suspicious.
Every year from 2006 through 2020, over 30% of all prescriptions that came into Walgreens and were filled were for opioids that had red flags that were not resolved.
After the state presented, tensions grew in the courtroom as the attorney representing Walgreens fired back.
It would be not only misleading, but prejudicial to us in a case where they have put at issue who caused this opioid crisis, and they're putting all the blame on us.
Walgreens attorneys told jurors that its company has a policy to watch over prescriptions, refuting the state's allegation that it wasn't monitoring prescriptions closely enough. Attorneys say Walgreens only gave out the painkillers prescribed by doctors and say the state should have been regulating the doctors.
The evidence is going to show that the state of Florida and the Office of the Attorney General did nothing.
Now, day 2 of the trial begins here in the next 2 hours, and court officials say the trial itself could last 6 to 8 weeks. Adrian?
All right, Ileana, thank you so much. Still ahead.
Adrian, Lopez killed a family of 5 from Houston who had just arrived to what police believe is their weekend home. Lopez then stole their car and was chased down by police. He was eventually shot and killed in a shootout with officers. Overnight, the massive manhunt for convicted murderer 46-year-old Gonzalo Lopez coming to an end.
Sigh of relief that Lopez will not be able to hurt anyone else.
Police killed Lopez during a shootout late Thursday night after the car he stole was stopped by a spike strip. Just hours before, police found a Houston family dead in their weekend home after a relative called police concerned about their whereabouts. Police say Lopez killed an adult and 4 children at their home before stealing their truck.
Lopez is obviously a killer. He has a disregard for human life.
The victim's home was about a mile from where Lopez was last seen 3 weeks ago when he escaped a prison bus and went missing. A neighbor in the area spoke to Ashley Banfield on News Nation last night and said this never should have happened.
It was very easy for him to find a place, that there wasn't someone living in for him to hide out and do that, which obviously is what he did. But I'm angry. I am angry at TDCJ for leaving us vulnerable and their negligence for allowing this man to escape.
Lopez led police on the largest manhunt they've had in the history of Texas. Lopez disappeared near Centerville, Texas on May 12th after stabbing the driver of his prison bus, then managing to get out of his handcuffs and the metal cage he was in. He was killed about 35 miles south of San Antonio. Lopez was a convicted murderer with a life sentence for capital murder and aggravated assault, and another life sentence for attempted capital murder. He also had a connection to the Mexican mafia. Lopez was also on the top 10 list of the most wanted fugitives in Texas. Good morning, Adrian. It's a training program for people who can't afford to go to college because tuition is either too high or they have to work full time to pay for their bills. We spoke to one woman who's about to graduate, and she says already this program has changed her life. Rose Guerrero is shadowing a teacher for a few more months before she graduates and can teach on her own.
This program is just the biggest blessing. I don't know where I would be or what I would be doing.
Guerrero got pregnant in high school. She worked multiple jobs, took care of her little ones, and couldn't afford housing or a car until she joined the teacher residency program at Clarksville Montgomery County School System in Tennessee.
I'm in there the whole time with the students, with the teacher, doing everything as if you were an actual teacher. Financially, it's amazing because I'm working and going to school for free.
A recent National Education Association survey found that 55% of educators plan to leave their jobs early due to the pandemic, blaming stress, teacher burnout, and low salaries. But Dr. Sean Imperatrice believes programs like this one can help solve the national teacher shortage.
We had 188 candidates apply for 80 spots this year, which is totally different than the national narrative of not enough people going into education.
The teacher residency program gives participants hands-on classroom training, provides college classes twice a week, and earns them a teaching certification in 3 years while getting paid to help in the classroom. It's also attracting new educators who may not have gone into teaching otherwise.
So many of these candidates that have worked for us in other capacity end up almost doubling their salary once they get certified. So now they have an opportunity to have a college degree and to change their life steps.
Now, this program is also attracting more diversity. More Black and Latino teachers are applying for this program, which educators say is very important in many of these districts where more representation is needed. And Adrian, this program is currently in 13 states.
All right, Ileana, thank you. Some good stuff to report there. And we first